Hey, I'm Liz, and I'm 18. Do you know that feeling when your parents think that your significant other is not good enough for you? For some strange reason, in these cases, you'll most likely ignore them and try to be happy with the person you love. And that's what I did. But as it often turns out, Mommy and Daddy know best. Everything began last year. My parents, as usual, took me to a restaurant to celebrate the ending of another school year. And all of a sudden, the waiter brought me a Shirley Temple. I tried to explain that I didn't order that, but he just smiled at me and said it was a complimentary drink from the bartender. I looked at the bar and saw a nice-looking guy who winked at me. I saw my dad frown, since he clearly didn't like the attention I was getting, but all evening, I stealthily glanced toward the bar. When we were about to leave, the same waiter put a napkin in my hand and mysteriously winked at me again. It was only when my parents and I were already inside our car that I inconspicuously unfolded it and saw a number and the name Kurt written below it. I could barely wait until my dad parked the car in our driveway. I was so eager to finally be alone and call my best friend, Nellie, to ask her what I should do with that number. You know, because she was kind of more experienced in relationships than I was. And despite the fact that she told me to ignore that napkin, I couldn't help but send a text message to that number. So, Kurt and I began chatting. And then the next day he asked me out, and, well, we began dating. From the very beginning, I never hid the fact that I was dating Kurt, neither from my parents nor my friends. I was telling everybody how courteous, caring, and smart he was, but none of them seemed to like my boyfriend. I was sure that the main problem was that he was kind of from a poor family. Apparently, working as a bartender, he was never going to make a fortune. And in addition, he lived with his sister and her baby, and they didn't have any other relatives. So Kurt was the only one who was able to provide a living for them. That made me very proud of him, and I felt bad for him at the same time. I tried to be helpful, so from time to time, I gave Kurt my old clothes and some toys for his sister and nephew. That was the least that I could do. And you can be sure that I tried to be understanding that he didn't have a lot of money. You know, to take me out to the movies and cafes all the time. So I was okay going on a simple walk in the park, or being the one who paid from time to time. My parents were not ecstatic at all about any of this, and whenever Kurt came to pick me up at home, my dad didn't even bother greeting him. But Kurt meeting my best friend Nellie would be a separate story. You see, for some strange reason, both of them didn't like each other, even without seeing each other. I was really hoping for the best while setting up that meeting, but as soon as we all arrived at the cafe, Nellie started an aggressive interrogation. I didn't even expect that she would be so tactless to, for example, ask him about his salary and then mock him, saying that this dinner was on her since he could hardly afford to pay for it. I tried to smooth over her attacks while feeling like I was on the chopping block, but then suddenly she jokingly asked if Kurt had ever had a brush with law. And to my complete shock, he answered yes. Everybody went silent for a moment, and Nellie even dropped the piece of pizza she was about to eat so that it fell right on her dress. Apparently, Kurt had finally gotten sick and tired of this whole meeting interrogation thing. So he just pulled a few bucks from his pocket, threw them on the table, and said that that would be enough to pay for our dinner. And then he just walked away. It took me another few seconds to decide that I needed to find out whether what he had said was actually true. Besides, Nellie's behavior with my boyfriend was really offensive to me, so I gave her an angry look and rushed to catch up with Kurt. The story that he told me was as simple as one could imagine. He and his sister were once going through some really harsh times. It happened when she had just given birth to her baby. They were short on money and really badly needed some baby stuff like diapers and so on. So for a couple of weeks, Kurt was stealing that stuff from the store he was working at. One day he got caught by the boss and got taken to the local police department. Fortunately, by the morning, his boss decided to not press any charges and picked Kurt up from there. But he had to work for free in that store for the next 6 months to pay everything off. And you know what? I was amazed by what a kind and brave person my boyfriend was. Even though shoplifting is definitely bad, for me, that time he acted like a real mature guy who was just trying to provide for his family. I don't know, having heard all that, all I could do was hug him and kiss him, and that was the first time that I confessed my love to him. Later that day, I sent Nellie a voicemail, telling her that story and trying to make her at least feel a little bit sorry for her attitude towards Kurt, but she kept insisting that something was wrong with him. Of course, after that, Kurt seemed to have suddenly realized that no one in my circle was happy about our relationship, and it kind of started bothering him. By this time, my 18th birthday was approaching. My parents were getting ready to arrange a party at our house with lots of friends and relatives. I really wanted Kurt to come too, so I begged my mom and dad to be nice to him, at least for one single evening. And everything was going nice during my party until the time came for presents. My parents gave me a car, the one that I had always wanted, and I was so happy and excited about this. Everybody crowded around me to get a better look at it. Well, to my surprise, I didn't see Kurt anywhere. I wanted to call him, but my guests kept coming up to me with their gifts and warm words. So, I just never got the chance to stop and do it. And when my dad asked where my boyfriend went, I had to lie to him and say that Kurt needed to go to work that night. But at the same time, Nellie muttered something like, Kurt probably had to run away because he couldn't afford to buy me anything worthy for my birthday. Of course, this whole situation seemed pretty strange. And when I finally managed to escape from my guests for a second, I started calling Kurt, but his phone was off. Needless to say, this completely ruined my mood for the rest of the night. In the morning, I woke up to a text message from Kurt, where he apologized for his behavior and asked me to come to his work later that day. Of course, I felt angry and extremely offended, but on the other hand, I definitely wanted to hear his explanation. Honestly, I was ready to get really dramatic, but as soon as I saw Kurt, he smiled at me widely, said how beautiful I looked, and handed me a box wrapped in colorful paper. It was my birthday present from him, which turned out to be the latest model of iPhone. Honestly, my jaw almost dropped from both excitement and unexpectedness. He explained that he felt inferior to my parents when they gave me that car. So he decided that if he also gave me something expensive, everybody around me would stop thinking badly about him. So he took all the spare money he had managed to save and borrowed some more from a couple of his friends to be able to afford that present. And right at the same moment, I had a picture in my head of this poorly dressed sister and her little baby. And I made up my mind that I couldn't accept this phone from him. But no matter how hard I tried to be polite and refuse it, it just made Kurt more furious. I was pretty sure that he didn't yell at me right then and there, only because he was at work. He said that he was too busy, and hence, I had to leave. He never called or texted me that day. And the next day, when I tried to reach him myself, he said he didn't want to talk to me anymore. I felt so bad that I had insulted him. I told Nellie the whole story. I mean, she was my best friend after all, and I just had to get her support. But she only said that our fight was for the best, and I could finally find someone who was equal to me. She even said that, taking into account Kurt's past, she wouldn't be surprised if he had stolen that phone. And these words of hers made me totally lose it. I decided that no matter what, I had to go to his place and apologize in person. And I could even go take that damn phone back if he still had it. I just didn't want to lose him. Kurt wasn't at home the moment I got there, so his sister let me in. She looked really surprised when she saw me, and as it turns out, she didn't know that Kurt had any romantic relationship at all. We were just sitting in front of each other at the dining room table, and both of us were keeping silent. She was attentively glancing at me as if I had done something wrong, and that made me feel awkward. I even started to think that I was wrong by going there, so I decided to leave right when the entrance door opened and Kurt came inside. As soon as he saw me, he turned pale and dropped the grocery bags that he was carrying right on the floor. That silent scene was broken by the enthusiastic cry of Kurt's nephew, who ran out to meet him and yelled, "Daddy's home!" Suddenly, I felt as if lightning had struck me. It was his son. And right at that same moment, that girl, who I thought was his sister, got totally hysterical and started calling Kurt a cheater. That's definitely not something that sisters call their brothers, right? I rushed away from that house and went straight to Nellie. When I told her everything, she was like, "I told you something was wrong with that guy." Well, judging by the fact that he has never even tried to reach out to me to explain everything, everyone around me was right about him from the very beginning.